Good morning, Quasar Markets Live. You got your host, Howard Greenberg, here this morning. Again, prayers and hopes out to Big Beat. Steve is down in Tampa. I have talked to him last night. He did make it through the storm. The house made it through the storm okay. But they're definitely without power, and, so he won't be in here today. He is hoping to be back on Monday morning with us. So, again, to everybody that was in the path of Milton, we are hoping for your best there. Let's get into it. So far, we saw stocks in Asia was mixed overnight. The Japan's Nikkei 225 index was up about 0.57%, while China's Shanghai Composite Index was down 2.55%. We also saw in Europe an afternoon trading there, that little bit of a mixed signals. The stocks Europe 600 index, which would be comparable to our S&P, rose 0.14%, and the FTSE 100 declined 0.15, similar to our NASDAQ. So we're seeing stock futures so far inching up this morning as investors are weighing those cooler than expected wholesale inflation numbers that came out at 8:30 here. We have seen that sort of tempered down the euphoria that we had sort of seen in the banking sector. JP Morgan, Wells Fargo, BlackRock, all reporting earnings before the bell here. Mixed bag there, but overall pretty good. JP Morgan especially had some good numbers. Wells Fargo was moving up nicely, even though their reporting numbers were not as well good this morning. So let's see here. I have those. You know what? Sometimes it's just easier for me to punch them in. JP Morgan, as you can see here, now actually down in the morning, here about 0.3%. So it had been moving up really nicely. It had been up near 216, 217, but at 8:30 or 8:54 here, for some reason, that just took a pretty big dump down. So that is interesting. I did point out that even with good earnings, we have seen a few times in the past year or so, year and a half, that JP Morgan has sort of gotten hit after earnings. So we'll see if that plays through today. And, my reasoning for that is that I think that sometimes expectations, because they are best in breed, is so high for them that it makes it difficult for them to get there. The shares were gaining and now are back positive. They did top profit and revenue expectations. The bank reported 4.37 earnings per share for the quarter, well ahead of the consensus of 4.01. So, we did see that. As I pointed out or mentioned, Wells Fargo, on the other hand, did not hit expectations, but they were seeing the stock move up this morning. In fact, we see it up 3.24, 3.4% now, getting a little bit of even more legs here. The bank reported $20.37 billion in revenue for the third quarter, just below the $20.42 billion that was expected by analysts. And the share, like I said, trading up over 3%. So, again, SPY had gone positive here. It is flirting with positive again. QQQ, not getting quite the run there. QQQ, I think part of that is Tesla weighing it down a little bit. Down about 6.65%. We're going to go more into that. So let's break down a little bit more what people are talking about, what analysts are saying, or what we've seen so far when it comes to JP Morgan, or what Jamie Dimon had to say. As I mentioned over this week, one of the things I would be looking for is, what did he say? Not as much, not that I'm not concerned with the numbers, but I thought the numbers would fall in about where they did. I wanted to see what he had to say about the economy. He's been really had a good pulse on what's been going on. So want to see if that holds up here this morning and continues. So what he did say in a statement is, while inflation is slowing and the U.S. economy remains resilient, several critical issues do remain, including the large fiscal deficits and the infrastructure funding needs. As I said, I do believe that investors and analysts pay a lot of attention to Dimon's commentary on the economy, as well as broader policy and international affairs. He also said that alongside third quarter earnings from the bank, that we have been mostly closely monitoring the geopolitical situation for some time, and the recent events show that conditions are treacherous and getting worse. And if we look at the numbers a little more, their net interest income was 23.4 billion in the quarter, topping the analyst estimate again of 22.7. Investors watch net interest income closely because it accounts for roughly half of JP Morgan's overall revenue. Again, that it reflects what lenders make from interest payments less what they pay back out to borrowers. And they have been denting big commercial banks' profits as interest rates fall. Other things on their earnings, like I said, EPS of 4.37, topping the analyst estimates at 3.99. Net income did fall from a year ago to 12.9 billion, but it had expected to be falling even further to 11.57. JP Morgan, the reason this is so important, they are the largest U.S. banks by assets. They have about 42.7 billion in revenue in the third quarter. So again, good quarter by JP Morgan, even if it is not necessarily translating right this second in the stock price. These are some of the times that I tend to look to pick up JP Morgan if it does irrationally go to the downside here, based on the fact that they had a good quarter. They are best in class. I do think banks are going to be set as they lessen the restrictions from the Basel and allow them to lend out more of the money. So we'll see that. We're going to get more into the banks. I do want to take a quick look. Yesterday, we did hit another one big here, JTAI, right? We were watching that yesterday in the pre-market hours. Let me pull up the chart here. And as you guys know, we had talked about yesterday if it could regain that VWAP, which at that point was sitting in the 0.1443 spot. We were looking for this to make a move up to that 1693 level and then to the 1859 level. Not only did it make that 25% move up, but if you had played this all the way to the top, you saw a 70% move to the upside. So again, that's the second day in a row we've hit a 25% winner here in the mornings on our reads of telling you what we're looking at with these pre-market pumpers. So I will mention JTAI is actually back in play here this morning. As you can see, it made another move up at 4 o'clock. And is still up about 27% and trying to break through VWAP again. So again, if we start to look at this, what do we like here? We got a little bit of a W formation, in my opinion. We're now trying to broach that middle section, trying to get through VWAP. If I can see this break through VWAP and break that 1093 level here today, so I will type all this out. So again, it is for the records. If we break VWAP and then break 1093, watch out. So this is one to keep an eye on to the upside. Downside, not as much play there, in my opinion. I think part of that is even if you took it from that level, well, you got about a 20% if it does reject at that level. So that's what you look at. You got about 20% downside, although we've seen a good floor here at that 955. So that 955 has been a pretty good floor here this morning, you can see. So let's take it up to that. So your downside probably around 12% here. If you're playing it, as you can see, it's actually a little less. For it to break VWAP, but then to also break the spot that we see at 6 a.m. couldn't break, 7:30 couldn't break. If we can break that here on open, watch out above. I mean, you saw the levels it made yesterday. What I'd be targeting there at that point would be this area at 1291. So I'd be looking for it. For a nice 16-17% move to the upside here. And you could even see it start to regain the levels it was at yesterday. So you definitely got it's definitely in play here. Definitely JTAI still in play, and we nailed that one yesterday. Bloom's another one that we were watching yesterday and the day before. Actually, we hit Bloom's 2 days ago. Making a little bit of a move here today too. has retraced down, but again, this is actually a setup that I sort of like. We make that big sweep up, right at the open, pre-market open, and then we tend to work our way back down with some of these to 930, and at 930 we see a bigger pop. So we want to keep an eye on this today. It definitely could give us that sort of formation, and you'll see that's what played out here, right, on the 10th. So yesterday played out. It made its move pre-market, came back down, retraced a lot of that move, and at 9:30, boom, it popped. So you could look at that, there for sure. So definitely one that's in play too. A couple of the others here down the bottom of my screen, we were looking at Xena up about 60% here in pre-market hours. This one's got a little bit of a different, sort of feel to it than you see with most, because it didn't make it all in one felt swoop. It's sort of been working its way up as it gets some volume pumps. So even negative volume has been a winner for it. It just needs volume to come back. So again, what I'd be looking at here, if we can see volume pick back up here like we did see it here, I like that. So that's what we're looking at here. We need volume to pick back up, get through this VWAP at 295, 296. And this would be in play also for a nice move up to that 329 area. So all the way up to 338. I'd be looking at it though, starting to fade it out at 331, sort of where you hit right about here. So that's where I'd be fading out of the trade, starting to fade out of it. So that's what we're looking at here again. And if I was looking to the downside, I'd be saying to myself that 271, that's got to be my stop loss, right? You can see that area here, we hit it earlier. That's what I'd be looking at, folks. So that's what we've got with Xena. Let's take a look at NIVF. Oof, that one might be falling away here. But again, we never say that because of the fact that sometimes these make that same move. And what we see here, right? This made the move after hours yesterday, made the explosive move up. This morning, it pumped right back up to almost that same level. It pumped back to the level that we saw. It tried to hit on a couple of different occasions here. And now it's played back down. If we see it again at 9:30, if this starts to make a move to the upside, keep an eye on it. If it doesn't, I would be looking for a fade right back down. So this is one you got just as much a chance that you might fade this as you might play it to the upside. Definitely volatility for those of you looking for a volatility play here today. This one's definitely in play. Again, NIVF. We'll keep an eye on that as we get into the open. We were looking at LUXH here. Again, another one pumped up big time yesterday at post-market hours, faded itself back down. And then took one more pump up here this morning, faded back down. But what I like to see here, what do we see, right? After making that move up, higher low. So we're looking for a swing high here. Does it do this again? Again, I'm not going to do anything here unless I see some conviction. We even though these are pumpers, we do play it to the safe side here. We want to keep it. So I'm looking for it to break VWAP, but not even VWAP. I want to see it get back above that 0.705. If it does, then, it still gives me plenty of room, because not only am I looking for it to make that 18.68 move percent up there, I would start to look at what was the box move it made here. And then I'd superimpose that box here and say, if it made that measured move up from this high to that high, if it makes that measured move up again, where are we actually at? And that's another, it would be another 23% to the upside. So definitely want to keep an eye on. You see it's getting a little bit of leg. It's going to give it a try. So again, you know, these don't all make it. Just more than most just fade out during the day, especially on open. But if you are watching these closely and you catch the one that doesn't, you know, again, you can see how this is already bouncing back in preparation here for the open. You can catch a big runner, so we definitely keep an eye on all these. Again, here's another one that did it, and we can see similar setup, right? Pumped after hours, faded back down this morning, made its second pump. Question is, does it make its third pump? And again, what I'm looking for here is this one I might get a little bit more aggressive because I might play something to the tune of, I see it break this high that it had here at 125, playing it up here from that level. You would have the VWAP to worry about, but my view on this one is the way that it's pumped through the VWAP. If it does hit the VWAP, it will see an explosive move through it. So I want to keep in mind. And again, if I'm looking at where am I putting a stop loss somewhere on that, anything below that 116 would scare me. So, you know, nice risk reward there. CETX was another one that was trying. This one's faded all the way out without giving it much of a pump. So it did right at 4 o'clock make its first move. Again, I never count them off until I see what happens here at 9:30. But this could be one to take a look at if it gets back even into the VWAP, you know, sort of standard deviation here at 5219. Could look for this for a big pumper. I mean, this morning that sucker made a 30% wick in 1 3-minute move. So, you know, it definitely has legs. It definitely has some power. You got to see what? Got to see the volume come back in there. DJT, our little Donald Trump stock, you can see how this sucker has, you know, it moved up Thursday right at open, came sideways. This morning, gapped up a second time. Now we're saying, what can it do here? I'd like to see what it does as it reapproaches. This would be one we're going to go a little different. As it reapproaches this VWAP here, if we can get another bounce. Now it has challenged VWAP, so we're going to have to, you know, this one's one you'll want to keep a close eye on because challenged VWAP once, recovered, challenged VWAP twice, already recovered, challenged it 3 times. You know, you don't want to challenge that too many times. But again, with the extra impedance it could get right off of the open here, we'll definitely be keeping an eye on that. Last one I was looking at this morning, AKAN. Interesting setup also. Again, last night, pumped, first thing this morning. Well, no, it took its first jump yesterday afternoon. No, right at 4 a.m. It took its first jump up. It took a second smaller jump. Took a third even smaller. But now retraced back to that same level we saw here about 5:30 this morning. And I'm interested to see again as we get to open if this sucker breaks that 124. You know, you've got a nice 12% move to that first set that I'd be starting to fade it out at. Second move, 146. But those are all pretty good moves to keep an eye on. They all could work in your favor. As we are starting to get closer to the open here, we are about 10 minutes away. SPY is now flat. QQQ down about 1/4 of a point. Bitcoin bounced back nicely. I was a little nervous about it last night. I actually was feeling more of a fade. Didn't make any play on it, but was feeling more of a fade than it. I thought we might challenge that 58 level. Never got down that low. Got down, 58.9. I thought we could go to the low 58, but never got there. So good to see Bitcoin holding up again. I'll be interested. Do we see a huge shift in ETF inflows at 9:30? Does that move the needle one way or the other? Gold back above that 26.25 that we know it had really been stuck at for a while. here the last few days. It hadn't been able to break above that. Now it has. So gold catching a bid here, trying to move back up to all-time highs. Silver 31.39. Did see an interesting report when it comes to silver, that China for the first time has decided to add it to its precious metal plan and program. So it was interesting. So, Steve had predicted silver could make a move up to that 50 handle there. That's what his view was over the next 6 to 9 months was, I think, the time frame he had been looking at there. So, might be time here to start to look at silver. I will say, though, today got a formation of a big M right now, but that's just on that 3-minute chart. Let's see what else we got to talk to you about here this morning. I want to bring this one up. We always hear all of that all money laundering and all things that are nefarious in the world happen with crypto. But yesterday, TD Bank pleaded guilty in a criminal money laundering case and agreed to pay $3 billion in fines to the Department of Justice and federal financial regulators. This was multiple charges against TD Banks, including laundering money and failing to maintain anti-money laundering program. This came about, and this was a Chinese company that Chinese money laundering situation that they uncovered. TD Bank is the 10th largest American bank by assets, and as part of the deal, they will have limits to its growth imposed by the Office of the Comptroller of Currency, that is who oversees banks, the OCC. So very similar to the handcuffs that we have seen just getting lifted off of Wells Fargo for similar, well, not similar, they were making phony accounts to plot up their numbers. In this case, no anti-money laundering in place. That's crazy. So, and this was that they admitted to failing to monitor $18.3 trillion in activity. Again, maybe crypto isn't the problem. Maybe bad people are the problem. So that's what we got to think about, I think, when we look at that. Oil prices, as I am about to get to here, Brent crude up to 78. WTI, the one that we want to take a closer look at or keep an eye on more. Currently at 75.46. So I wanted to point out, spent the entire week over 70 here. So again, we had seen oil down in that 63 level, even as low as that down here last couple weeks ago. Now, nicely holding above that 70 handle. Crude remains underpinned by uncertainty around the expected Israel retaliation for the barrage of ballistic missiles launched last week by Iran. I will say one thing to keep in mind, again, I'm going to be a person not holding many open positions over this weekend. You might say, why? Tonight at sundown starts the holiest holiday for the Jewish religion, Yom Kippur. And, the last time that we hit the holiday last week, which was Rosh Hashanah, that's where we saw Israel get bombed by Hezbollah, Hamas, Syria, and on the West Bank all at the same time. So wouldn't surprise me to see some sort of, either is this when we see the retaliation from Israel, or do we see another attack from Iran and its proxies? So keep that in mind. I do think that is definitely in play over this weekend. Saw some analysts, so Helma Croft, the head of global commodity strategy at RBC Capital Markets, said the firm expects the White House to potentially encourage Israel to target refineries instead of oil export facilities. So again, this U.S. influence might be not as strong as it was in the past. We've seen that Bibi is doing his own thing, and doesn't necessarily cure what Biden wants him to do, or anybody else for that matter. So, Iran has warned Gulf states not to allow Israel to use their airspace to any attack or risk retaliation. They seem to be alienating themselves more and more by the minute when it comes to these things. In April, Israeli missiles and jets flew over Syria and Iraq, and military strategists have pointed out that this northerly route would be the most likely path, so it could potentially put the Iraqis' barrels into balance. So you got to keep that in mind. Got to talk about my man Elon Musk. You guess it was time to fade the Musk when it came to those robotaxi day. We talked about it. Sell the news, sell the news, sell the news. Well, people have. It's down 7% after being down 1% yesterday. I did watch it. I love that stuff. It was a little. It was a show and tell. That's what I compared it to my daughter going to school today with her slinky for show and tell. He came jumping out of what is going to be the new robo taxi or robo cab, I think it's called, cybercab. But it has no steering wheel or pedals, costs under $30,000, which is what I thought was interesting. They're also coming out with a robo van that can transport up to 20 people at a time or carry goods. So that last minute delivery type things that we see with Amazon and many of the others could definitely be at play here. And with that, I have to also point out the other side of that is markets picking winners and losers, so to speak. And what I mean there, Uber, obviously now up 4% here in pre-market trading rather, as a result of this. So I think the investors are saying, hey, we're not worried anytime soon that this is really going to disrupt Uber's business. We also know that Uber is partnered in their own robo-taxi programs with Google and Waymo and GM's Cruise. So they are already in that business themselves. The Cybercab will not start till 2027. I think that is part of what's weighing down. They're going to use their current Model 3 and Model Y for these right now. Sticking in the tech industry, AMD had their sort of investor day, unveiling everything yesterday. It is moving up slightly here. It did move down initially after seeing the news. They did launch their new AI chip Thursday that's aimed with competing with NVIDIA's Blackwell chips. The chip called the Instinct MI325X is going to start production before the end of 2024. NVIDIA has dominated, GPU markets and data center markets. They enjoy about a 75% gross margin on those products. So if AMD's AI chips are seen as a close substitute, it could put pricing pressure on NVIDIA. So we'll see how that works out. NVIDIA, I did see their CEO on CNBC briefly this morning. Most industry estimates that NVIDIA has over 90% of the market for data center AI chips. So AMD is trying to get in that business. AMD expects that will be worth $500 billion by 2028. So if all goes to plan, they feel that this new Instinct will be matched up against Blackwell chips and that they can start to see some significant quantities of orders shipping out next year. Again, I don't think it was that bad of an announcement. I actually thought it was good. So we'll see. I do have some other notes that from the day. CEO Lisa Su said that it now expects the market for AI data center graphics processing units, or GPUs, to grow by more than 60% a year and reach that 500 billion mark by 2028. Last year, the anticipation was the market could exceed 400 billion by 2027. So again, we're seeing it just, as it goes further out, continuing to step up. And I see it. I mean, I know my needs for GPUs as I'm doing this stuff, and from the house is moved up. I have to upgrade everything. I need more systems. I'm going to need more and more GPUs. And then at Quasar, we're using more and more data centers and things to hold our AI models and everything that we do. So again, we talked about this. This is the wave of the future. These chips are the wave of the future. So we got to do that. AMD is probably considered to be about, that if NVIDIA is the king, they're the queen in there. So, we'll see what happens. They're making great strides and becoming a total AI platform provider. So they need to make a dent into NVIDIA's share if they're going to see that next move up, that explosive move up. So it's not bad. I did see Piper Sandler adjusted their estimate on it to $200. Right now trading at 164. And in general, you know, it has an outperform rating on most of the analysts. And oh, we are open. Let's see what we get here. We are open. I want to keep our eye on those pumpers to start off with. This is when we got to see what do they do here. Do they do anything? And we are seeing coming off the bottom. So Xena trying to make a move here. Is it going to break that 297? NIVF moving in the other direction. So this would be a fade. We talked about this. This would probably be a fade at this point. LUXH. It already moved into our zone there. So this would be one that we would be in play on here. You would look at. It made its first jump up. It has retraced. Bouncing right off VWAP here. So if we can get a bounce off VWAP, again, LUXH could be in play here. AGBA moving still down. CETX still moving down. DJT, it's got a little bit of a pump. It's trying. So DJT, here it goes. This is another one you could look at here. Donald Trump stock. Again, any break above that 26.35, you could see a run up to that 27.70 place. This has been a runner. Does look like it's losing a little bit of momentum here. Let's take a look at JTAI. It's not there. I told you this could drop all the way down here to this bottom. If we do see that, we could look for a bounce play there, more at that level of 0.955. So let's get to the one that is moving. Xena. LUXH has retraced, not moving the right way. Xena is the one that's trying to get a run now. It passed that VWAP, so again, this would be another one you're looking at now. It could run up to this. First set is going to be this 319, then 331, 338. So we see a pumper again here. We see one of them moving up from the levels we were looking at. LUXH down about the level we said that would be where it gets support here, that we'd be looking for support. Is it going to bounce back up here, or did that give all it had? You can see volume disappeared. We got the initial volume pump. It didn't come out, as opposed to here we can see the volume pumping up on Xena, price moving with it. Blooms, what's Blooms doing here? It's not moving up. Love JTAI. I'm going to bounce at that 955 area if it can make that move. Xena struggling to hold above the VWAP here. There it goes. Bounced right at VWAP. You love seeing that. Come on. Let's get some momentum going there. LUZX. It bounced back up from that spot. Pretty nice wick there. You like to see that nice long wick on the left-hand side of you. AGBH trying to stay in the game here. So we got some of the pumpers going. Let's take a look. Tick has been really nicely positive here in the open. First starts, first nicks there are looking good. We are now up 0.49 on the Dow Jones, 0.1 on SPY. QQQ still moving in the wrong direction. Let's see how much of that is Tesla here. Oh, yeah, it's Tesla. Look at that, down almost 10% on the day. Did have an area where I was looking at, you know, if we get close to this 225, where I would not be afraid to make a nice little pickup on Tesla for the outside. Or, excuse me. That's what I was looking at. 202. Sorry about that. Gave you the wrong info. If we get a pullback all the way to 202 here, could be an interesting play. That's the 200 SMA. Usually very strong support at 200. Let's pull that on the daily chart and take a look here at Tesla. You can see in general it doesn't spend much time below that 200-day MA. That's one to keep an eye on here. Let's see what's moving to the upside. Bitcoin on a nice run here, 61,705. I will point out that we, yesterday on our show with Jeremy Vreeland, the Market Watch, watch list, excuse me, I was pointing out what Bitcoin has been in is a little bit of a symmetrical consolidation triangle since, back end of July, beginning of August. It hasn't been able to break out yet, but what you tend to see is, big moves. If it does break that gold line that you see there is the trend line since the all-time high, sort of where we've seen the resistance sort of play out. We've made a couple of moves over it, but really haven't been able to hang any extended period over that type of time frame there. VIX at 2065 here. Apple down about another half a point here yesterday. We know we've been talking about their disappointing iPhone sales, and we can see, whoa, definitely not looking good here to start. On the other side of that, Affirm, the buy now, pay later. You guys got to be sick of hearing me talk about this, but since the beginning of August, this thing has been on a tear here, on another run up today, up about 5%. AMD, like we said in the news, it did drop down, now trying to bounce up, not seeing that bounce. Amazon on the legs of a good day yesterday, moving up here a little bit this morning. AutoZone up 1.09 here, so AutoZone 1.09. Bank of America, we got to mention, that's Boeing, excuse me. Boeing up 0.8% here, so Boeing getting a little love. Didn't hear any news on that, looking to see if there's any news. No, in fact, it says Boeing has withdrawn the latest payoff of striking workers after negotiations with the International Association of Machinists and Aerospace Workers broke down. So interesting that Boeing's actually catching a bid here on that news. Chinese stocks getting hit here a little bit in the pre-market. Baba down about a point. Baidu down 1.27%. JD 1.74%. Neo 1.93%. So in general, again, seeing a little bit of downside in China. We've been talking about that. Keep your eyes on the prize there. There's Bank of America. Bank of America actually up about 3.62% today, so catching some wind. They might have, no, they do earnings tonight at the no, earnings next Tuesday, excuse me. But catching some wind. We did hear that Warren Buffett has now gone below the 10% holding threshold, which means he no longer has to report anything there. So they sold down his position, bringing it below the reporting threshold for the SEC. In a filing, he said that he sold more than 9.5 million shares, split between 3 transactions made Tuesday to Thursday, and it brings his stake down to about 9.987. So staying under that level there now means we won't get reports until quarterly earnings on anything there. Another one that was moving up earlier, let's take a look at Fastenal, FAST. Up about 3.66% here today, although you can see it was as high as 73.90, now trading about in the midpoint. They rose after the company reported better than expected earnings. It's a relief for investors that are looking for signs that manufacturing growth in the U.S. is turning a corner. If you don't know, Fastenal is an industrial distributor company, so they are right in the middle of manufacturing. They announced that their third quarter earnings per share 52 cents from sales of $1.9 billion in revenue. Wall Street was looking for 51 cents on $1.9 billion, so right at estimates. A year ago, they had reported EPS of 52 cents and 1.8, so very, not a lot. Not a lot has changed there. I did see a note from their CEO, Dan Flornez, said results reflect a continuation of challenging business conditions. The quarter finished stronger than it began, which is a welcome change. Stronger is good news. Their results, after all, are a useful read on the manufacturing economy. They distribute tens of thousands of products to thousands of customers in a dozen industries across the country. And recently, things haven't been great there. As we know, the manufacturing economy has been mired in a long post-COVID slump. as seen through the Institute for Supply Management's PMI index. It is a gauge of manufacturing activity, and it's been below 50, which indicates, usually that 50 level or above indicates growth. It's been below 50 for 22 of the past 23 months, one of the weakest stretches on record. In fact, it's declined 16 out of 18 months, going back to the financial crisis. So, not good there. Let's see if AEHR is still moving up here. Well, it's pulled back a little bit. We had seen them gap up here earlier after they reported fiscal earnings and revenue. They are a semiconductor test and semiconductor company, and they are testing some new equipment for artificial intelligent processors, gallium nitride power semiconductors, hard disk components, and flash memory. But moving down here as we get going, tick is still staying positive here. It stayed positive. It started moving positive at 8:30. Lost that after about 15 minutes. So I'm going to see, do we have more staying power than after the news, after we got the morning news across the board here. Bitcoin back at 61,441. Let's take a look at those early morning pumpers we were keeping an eye on here. So you can see Xena finding good support at this 271 level, but unable to make a move up yet. Not a good look there. LUXH. After breaking through VWAP and looking like it wanted to be a morning pumper, it's lost some steam here. We'll see what happens. AGBI did make that bounce back up, now trying to make a move. So it did enter. I said if it broke back into the VWAP range here. Oh, that was a big move. Let's see if it can make it through VWAP. That's going to be the question. Like I said, I wanted to see it break that 125. It rejected pretty hard right at it so far, but it breaks this 125. You could see a nice run up here, there. DJT pulling back a little bit, so that fell below the VWAP, as you can see. We pointed out it had challenged it 3 times. On the 4th one, it broke out pretty hard below it. It is regaining VWAP here, so it is trying to get some momentum back. Look at the one that's making the move again. Look at the one making the move here again. JTAI. We told you what we were looking at here. It made that bust through that 1098. It's made it almost all the way to that 17% hit we were looking for here. So JTAI still in play. It makes a move over that. Your next area you're looking at is 1482. So that's what we're looking at. This is the one that we hit yesterday. It's hitting again today. Losing a little momentum, but that's a nice move. I mean, even if you start throwing a trailing stop on it now, it's in a good place. JTAI is the pumper to watch. Here it goes. 1267. Do we break this? Do we hit our 17% target here? Come on, let's do that in the first 15 minutes of the day. Let's give a 17% winner here right off the bat. Come on, JTAI. Let's get through there. It's struggling to do. It's trying. It's trying. We'll point out in 15 minutes I do have the man Stephen Flanagan in to talk about FX today, so I will have Stephen in. In fact, in a few minutes here, I'm going to step away for a minute to make sure I get him all set up. Have someone asking in the chat here, AVGO, to take a look at. AVGO. Not seeing any news either. Not any real news there. And AMD's pulling back about the same. You only need, well, 4%. That is pretty big. AMD is now up. What's Nvidia doing? Nvidia is just down a little bit. QCOM? Yeah, I don't see any news there either. Oracle up 0.78, another one. MSTR, I called this out yesterday on the watch list. I liked MSTR. Up 5.97%. I gave the zones I liked here yesterday. Look at that. It pulled right back towards it. Said I liked it as a bounce off of that spot yesterday. Nice move up. IWM up a little bit. I like that as a longer term play, brought up on the show yesterday also. Give me a now we're good. DJT making its move. DJT now up 10.53, so things are starting to make a move. What do we see here? GTAI coming back down. See if it can make its move. Nothing making a runaway yet. So far, some of those spots that I was pointing out as resistance have stopped a lot of these. So none of the pumpers really have the wings this morning. TWG. Here we go. TWG, nice on a bounce of the VWAP here. You could play this one for sure. I'd want to see it go positive. I'd want to see, you see the big wick here. If I can see another decent big wick here, let's move to the upside. Could look to enter this one in that 506 area for a run up to 564. Here it goes, going green. I'd be liking this right now. Just want to keep an eye on for sure. It's definitely the one that has the most legs. It's trying. Pelletier up another almost point here today. It hit a new all-time high, so we talked about that. It got rejected right at that, well, a little low. 44.89's all-time high. 44.89 got as high as 44.38. Rejected right at that spot we talked about yesterday on the watch list. Uber continuing to see some nice move up here this morning. Again, a beneficiary without a doubt of the robo-taxi unimpressive performance there. Tesla bouncing back, so it was down almost 9%. Elon starting to find a floor here. I was hoping to see that sucker get down all the way to that 200 MA. Give a really juicy entry there, but we're not getting there yet. CETX trying to make its move. So this is one of the ones we brought up this morning, trying to make a move back up here. JTAI still trying. Question here, would it hit my stop before it hits my target? Mara, another one that I talked about on the show. Did say though, you got to watch with Mara here on this daily chart. You can see it's had trouble breaking through this sort of descending channel. You know, it's made some pumps, but that's where it's lived. Challenging to break through it right now. Love to see it make a move up towards this 200-day MA at 1954 on a break above. Bitcoin holding up pretty well. Okay, I'm going to take a quick 10-minute break here, and I'll be back with Stephen Flanagan right at 10 o'clock.
Okay, how are you? Sorry, I'm a little late. Okay. Um, well, I think, the DXY is probably, the number one thing trading up to, where are we? 103 right now. Yep, yep. And I think that that's been the theme. We've been following that from the low. So stick with that, and then talk about interest rates. We still have the ECB next week. Canada's on the 23rd. All that, and then BOJ at the end of the month, all preceding the next Fed meeting. So, yep, yep. Oh, great. Yeah, I sent out a join me on Quasar Markets on my Twitter handle last night. I'm ready. You can just start off maybe talking about volatility because I got a nice little one liner for that.
Welcome back, Quasar Markets Live. I'm here with Mr. Currency himself, Stephen Flanagan. Seeing a lot of volatility here this morning, everybody. Stephen, what are you seeing out there?
Well, Howard, one of the first things we want to remember in currencies as a more macro view is money moves first. And let's highlight that. There was disappointment over the China stimulus program that we saw. And if you look at the Aussie dollar, which is a proxy for how we view China, you had a high of 69.41 and you've subsequently gone down now to 67.10
Yeah.
on that disappointment of the stimulus. That's how quick you can see how money moves instantaneous. Money moves first in our markets, and that's one of the mantras I love to use in currencies because the it information transmits into the currency market instantaneously because the markets are so electronified. Everything's hooked up to an automated, some sort of automated algorithm.
That's a great point. That's a great takeaway. Money moves first. That's what we got to keep our eyes on in this market. That's why we have Steven. And he just brought up something that's near and dear to my heart, as you know, on blockchain and crypto and the use of electronic trading, and that should be the future of how the New York Stock Exchange trades. There's no reason that in this day and age we should be at T plus two, T plus three on settlements. I mean, that's just crazy. That's like living in the 1800s still. Everything else is moving in their technology. No one spends more money on technology than CBOE, than CME, than NYSE. But meanwhile, that's never changed. This is going to come out of left field because we didn't talk about talking about this. But I got to ask you, why is that case? You come from that world. Why is it so far behind?
Well, let's start off. Currencies moved a few months ago to T plus one, which everybody thought would be a shocker, and it wasn't. It set up a couple of nuances in the markets because currencies have always been a 2 day settlement all the way back. That you always had that sort of situation. Technology perhaps wasn't there in the earlier days. Currencies only free floated in 1971 when Nixon closed the when Bretton Woods fell apart. So it was always a 2 day settlement. Now we're back. Technology is there, and it was really a slight hiccup, if not even anything, to move into T plus one. So there's no reason why that kind of won't mature even further, following perhaps the crypto space.
Yeah, I mean, we see it. We see BlackRock, who just announced today. I don't know if you saw their earnings. Not too bad. $13 trillion in money that they're managing. AUM now is just insane. But they're one of the ones that are sort of leading that charge. They're doing some stuff over in Switzerland where they have a little bit more of a federal, fiscal sandbox to play around in. And I think we're going to start to see. We're seeing it in your world of treasuries are getting settled on a blockchain now and using that to be instant settlement. So we'll see if that moves into currency next from treasuries.
Possible, Howard, and I would look for that evolution obviously to continue. But one of the particular problems is the funding issue.
Okay.
Because we trade a global market, $7.5 trillion trades in one trading day. How
Wait,
does
what was
one
that
fund
figure again?
7.5 trillion?
Wow. Wow.
This is why the currency markets are so large,
Yeah.
because they are active all night long, right? You go to sleep in New York. In my trading day, I would come home from work at 7 o'clock. I would get a little dinner. I'd sign back on to catch the Asian lunch hour. And then I would wake up at 1:30 to catch the early European market hour, because sometimes those little tidal waves would continue around the globe. But think about an equity manager in the US or a Japanese equity manager funding a US portfolio, and perhaps certain balances have to be done at the New York close. So 4 p.m. New York, well, at 5 p.m., we change the value date
Right.
and start a new trading day. So, how does one fund their yen or dollar or euro or Swiss? How does one fund that account if you move to an instantaneous type of situation? Because not all of the participants in the markets have the technology to make those decisions as to what our funding is going to be needed, at a 5 p.m. New York close. So it does present some technical challenges. Evolution of the marketplace will find solutions, and there's a number of third party venues right now that are finding those solutions. But I would look for that to continue.
Yeah, I know because just being a judge at the U.S. FinTech, we had we had a banking sector, and it's interesting what they are working on doing that, following sort of the lead. Because my answer to that would be if you were using blockchain and you were doing it, you could instantaneously move, the same way that someone can move from USDT to Bitcoin to Ethereum in seconds and have it settle. Eventually we're going to see that point, and I truly believe it. Sooner than later you're going to see that, where we get a digitized version of this that allows for more of the instantaneous swaps, is what we call them in the world of crypto, between different exchanges and between different currencies. That maybe that will follow through. I do think it has to be more time tested. You can't have $7.5 trillion traded. Let's just start that up in one day. But I do think you could start to see that in the future. I want to
I
talk to you a little bit about
Go
rates
ahead.
today, if that's okay. And
Yeah.
I'm still seeing people willing to take what I call sort of easy money right now, right? Still above 4%. What are you seeing on rates, where they're going to move? I know we've got a few countries over the next couple of weeks that are going to have before the FOMC. What are you seeing here?
Okay. Well, we highlighted in our discussion on Monday what was ahead. First up was the RBNZ, New Zealand. They cut rates 0.5%, which was a shocker for the New Zealand's. And you've seen immediately to 4.75%. So that's 0.5% cut from 5.25, and that kind of surprised markets. Next up, though, was the RBI in India, and they kept rates unchanged at 6.5%. Now, that may say, like, okay, that's nothing, but 10 straight meetings with no change, they suddenly changed the language from a withdrawal of accommodation to neutral. So there's
Okay.
two central banks. So that sets them up for cutting rates. And then we jump right into the Bank of Japan, where Deputy Governor Himono has said later in the year we'll have enough data and a better picture to set up perhaps that January rise in interest rates in Japan. And again, we're coming from a 0.2%
Right.
recently off of 0%, right? As Japan gets more comfortable that they have beaten the deflationary 20-year battle they've been in. So these are some of the things that have happened and will happen. Next up is Canada. Their unemployment number today was 6.5%, and that's an improvement from 6.7. They have been successively cutting interest rates down to 4.25%. They meet on the 23rd of October. I'm expecting them to be on hold. That might be a telltale signal, though, that the Fed is going to be watching very carefully. Um, I did skip one. Next up is ECB on the October 17th. That's next week. Given that inflation is under 2%, their guide, I expect a cut of 0.25%, an additional to 3.4%. All of this is undermining why I see the dollar index trading firm, because I think that the possibility based on CPI, PPI, now our employment situation seems to be with the jobless numbers jumping up. Still, I see the inflation being a little bit of a caution, especially when we look at where oil prices have been and are now today, that the Fed could be on hold. Certainly the 0.5%'s off.
Yeah, I mean, we're definitely seeing that. I'll point out DXY. You're the one that said we, look forward to re-challenge this 104 area if we do see some of those things play out. Do you think the labor numbers were more a reaction to the hurricanes, and the weather, or an actual economic change? I think that they might have been a shorter term blip. I happen to see the devastation even hit up here into Ohio.
I'm sure that that was a factor, but if we're going to start, I try to look at numbers on face value,
Okay.
because when you begin to get out the slicing and dicing machine, we can go back to this recent employment number that showed a strong economy, the last number ahead of the elections, and you can begin to slice and dice that how the heck did the government create all those jobs that turned the number positive,
That's
which
I,
would
I
mean
saw that yesterday. A few of the talking heads having that argument that all this growth's happening. You got to break it down into sectors and look. If the government's the one hiring everybody, is it really a hiring or not?
that's
Um,
right. Let's face the 5%, 5.5% bite of interest rates and the rapid move in which the Fed moved, first time in their history that's that quickly, is having a bite, and the employment situation is stabling but beginning to move back up. Probably we could see, the unemployment number I would expect probably around 4.2, 4.5%, as the Fed has clearly moved the guideline from inflation back to the employment situation.
well, that was until yesterday. Now, because it was CPI came in hot. Now it's all back. That now they made a mistake. It shouldn't. It's funny how the echo chambers start to take off, as we know. And you see it because now, the Michelle Bowman camp, which was, we should have only done this at a quarter point. Now all of a sudden that group's getting a little bit louder, and we are seeing some talk that maybe it's time not to make another move up, which is interesting because again, a week ago I think everyone you talked to was 25, 25. There was going to be a half a basis point somewhere along there. So that's interesting there. As you were talking, I noticed a few things on a couple of the currencies that you mentioned that I'd ask you some questions on here. Just want to see. I put lines. I thought, what did I do here? There it is. So in the euro, I noticed that we've had a pretty good floor at that 1.09 area. Do you see anything that brings us back down to this 107, 106 range, or is this a pretty good spot historically? I'm trying to learn the FXs here as I have you on, so I'm trying to get a little bit of a better feel for if technical analysis still matters as much, and do these things hold up? So if these questions are a little remedial, understand that just like our viewers, I'm trying to get a better handle on FX and currencies.
let me give first of all, let me underscore. I'm a Euro bear. Okay,
Okay.
there are there are structural inefficiencies within the EU, the eurozone, that one day will come out to play and will cause a problem. Now, having said that, if we jump back into 2008, the ECB is not a lender of last resort, as England is and the US is. And that defines the currency base. There is not that situation. However, they made special rules around the ECB to allow them. So I do see the euro dollar. If you open that chart up and go weekly, and then you can get a better picture from a historical. Remember, the euro is only in existence since 1999.
Yeah.
And when you look at that chart, look at that, you can see how that 109 area plays a pivotal role in the euro dollar.
Yeah.
In fact, you've spent so much time up. There are so many euro bulls in the marketplace. I maybe would say there are so many dollar bears in the marketplace. And that defines why the sharpness of this move up in the dollar index, because no one is positioned for the sudden change, highlighting money moves first. We came off of that 125 level and I've hit 103. If we get much above a 103, 25, 30 level, I think you should be looking at the Dixie to probably trade up around 104 and a half.
Yeah.
And
That's
this
exactly what
market
you
is not
pointed out
well
to us.
positioned.
I have
Yep.
it on the chart. I got it on there where you pointed it out a few weeks ago. So I'm
Which
keeping an eye
only
on it.
just gets back up to the old highs. That's
Right.
all that do. But look at how the market is coming off such a bearish trend,
Right. Oh
and
yeah.
this
And it is
highlights
range. It's basically been range trading since February.
exactly, and it highlights the herd mentality in the trading markets. When you begin to go into those quieter moments, the herd mentality is what begins to move a lot of the currencies, because currencies take on a more macro, a global, as we're talking, a
Yep.
more global look. I think the weakness within Europe, remember, UK, we talked about Friday's GDP,
Yep.
point two. Okay,
Dead.
point. The patient has still got a heartbeat, but not much. So when you begin to look at other areas, you begin to see their weakness. And with the 10-year over 4%, the US dollar suddenly has got this interest rate picture that suddenly money is moving very rapidly into a dollar funding.
Right. Thank you for that breakdown, because those are the things that I'm still trying to learn and get my arms around. This is all sort of new to me on the currencies and how they move. I've always just watched DXY because it affects how money moves into stock markets, and like they say, right? Yields up, prices down, yields down, prices up, because money moves. That would be a little bit just like your statement. Money moves first, and that's what you look
Yep.
for. Got a question for you. Junk bonds, they actually seem to be catching a bid right now too. Is that something that you would expect in this type of climate with the numbers we're seeing?
Well, there you go. That highlights just what we're talking about. People going into those, because where is the interest rate on some of these? It's got to be in north of 5%,
Right.
6%. And of course, that becomes with, we refer to this as a double bang. If you can get a high yield and catch a currency move, you not only get the appreciation of a currency, but you get the yield to stay intact. So you get the double bang play. We could easily look at a scenario back a year and a half, 2 years ago, where yen was a big area where people use, but that's called a carry trade, a little
Right.
different. But the double bang idea was that the dollar yen moved higher,
Yeah.
so you got an appreciation of your dollar yen position, and you got an appreciation, say, in a Nvidia. So that's called the double bang that you catch.
Absolutely.
And that's how currencies play in an international space.
And that that's a great point. You brought this up last time we talked a little bit about, or it might have been a couple of times before, your role at J.P. Morgan, where you would be making some decisions for some of the equity, so to speak, because you would be the hedge against what they're doing, or showing them this where they could exasperate their earnings, their gains on a stock or on a sector because of not only the expected move in that delta of the stock, but the expected move in the currency, like you're saying. Is Japan usually the best one for that because of the fact that they stay so neutral on their rates for so long?
Japan for 20 years has been, roughly 0% interest rates, roughly. Okay. So, yeah, so that has been a funding vehicle. It still is a funding vehicle, but now you have, as we saw in the last few months, a rapid appreciation capability, which then undercuts that carry trade idea. In the big banks, keep in mind, the trading desks, which I was part of, are completely separate and on their own from the advisory role that FX advisors would have, which would be a separate unit which advises other areas of the banks. The trading desks are completely separate,
Okay.
with walls in between on that. So, we would have our views, and people could ask a view, but it would be primarily, a trading view that you have. More of the macro, longer term things are in the sales and FX advisory roles that take place.
Okay. Um, I just lost my. I had a follow up for you on that question, and then I just lost it there. Sorry about that. I oh man, I was gonna
Yeah,
ask.
that's a characteristic of what we call a spot trader. A spot trader trades in and out of the
I know
marketplace,
what it
right?
was. I was gonna say that I think that another, uh, person is sort of following your guide there. That maybe, the contrary view of the U.S. dollar bull. I've noticed Warren Buffett. He's put together a lot of money, and I've seen a little rumblings that in Japan that he's looking to buy, buy in Japan. They're, as they call them trading houses. They're not what we consider trading houses. They're really more like Berkshire themselves or Apollo. They're private equity companies. Suminoto, he's the largest shareholder there. Are Would that be sort of what you're looking at too? Do you think he's maybe following what you're saying and saying, I think the dollar is going to weaken here on this run, and maybe there's some more value on the reverse of the carry trade by getting into the Japanese trading houses?
Well, let's highlight that's a very long term macro view and highlight that with a comment. During the 2008 problem, if you recall, public knowledge, Warren Buffett stepped in and bought Goldman Sachs and then 5%, and then had an option to have another 5%. And that was probably one of the quickest $1 billion he ever made.
Right,
So,
absolutely.
yes, he is a market leader. And absolutely, when one looks at a more macro, longer term perspective on the US dollar and factors in the debt, at some point in time, somebody's got to pay the piper.
Yeah.
Longer term positioning, the yen probably has a great upside in being long yen and short the dollar. And I think that that's the way he's looking at that. And Japan is the first that's coming out of this deflationary environment, which China seems to be facing now. And Japan is first coming out. They've made tremendous structural changes, but it's taken them a quarter century
Century,
to
yeah.
get out.
Without a doubt there. So that's some great information because I've been watching that closely. Warren's been getting ready for something. I mean, he's got just an immense amount of cash. The question, people are asking, is he buying energy? Is he buying Japan? Where's he going to go next? He had that big move into Brazil with Nubank. I saw they're moving into Canada, into Mexico. I think that's going to be interesting. I don't know if you follow them at all, but they're such a big player in Brazil, a fintech. Probably one of the most successful fintechs up there with SoFi, out of Japan and stuff. So I'm interested to see
And
what happens there. What he's got lined up next.
yeah, and Mexico at 10.5% interest rate, that's not a bad investment, is it?
Right? No, not at not at all. That you make some money on your loans. I was surprised. Wells Fargo actually said net interest was down for them. Everybody else that's been reporting so far that I've seen, net interest is up pretty well. We know they've been hamstrung by their limits that they had in place after their issue. I had to bring up, again, you and I have joked a little bit about the crypto versus regular FX. Hey, I thought all money laundering was done with Bitcoin. What is TD getting hit with $3 billion in fines for?
Yeah, well, those, those those are going to be very hard lessons learned. I
Yeah.
read the story on it, and absolutely, there's no place for that in the banking, and they're going to be paying for that for quite some time.
Yeah, and I don't mean to make light of it because it's not a good situation.
No.
For all of all of the world, we don't need Elizabeth Warren to have any more ammunition to start getting in front of CNBC or any of these other people and start her ranting and raving. And that's the type of stuff that will, and it really was pretty bad. Chinese money laundering. It was a huge amount, trillions of dollars that they had to admit that they had allowed to just move without having the proper, things in place. And like you said, I mean, it's taken Wells Fargo a long time to build their way out of this and to finally get off of that sort of trouble with FINRA and everybody else. I think the OCC is going to hit them hard. They haven't announced what that is yet, but I do think we're going to see that.
And it's how long they then become subject to intense scrutiny.
Yeah, and people don't realize what that means. That means there's someone literally sitting in the desk next to the risk manager, or someone that's calling him after every single move that happens and wants to know, what did you do? How did that happen? The amount of people they'll have to add to their compliance teams is going to be immense. The Overwatch is expensive.
Yes, and perhaps in the new year, I'll be in a better situation to talk about the relief it is to get out from underneath of that pressure cooker.
Yeah, absolutely. That would be great to hear. Okay, we've had you here for almost a half hour. I try not to take up too much of your time, but you give us such great information. Any sort of parting words? What do you have us look at here this weekend or, over the next week here?
Well, in the parting, I would say in with the line "money moves first," you must look for an increased volatility in the marketplaces, all of the markets. If we just look at the responses that the market takes after an economic release, because when we get these economic releases, especially on the inflation front and such as industrial production, this is a new data point, which then gets a new weighting within these computer models, which immediately within milliseconds are executing orders. And that's why you can see if you just look at a 1 minute bar after an 8:30 release and look at what's going on.
Yeah,
This is the
I had it up this
volatility.
morning. You could see it
Yep.
across the board. I
This
looked
is
at a
the
3 minute, but
volatility.
it was immense. What you
Yeah. And this type of volatility is just beginning to get unleashed, especially when we look at the divergence across the globe in interest rates that is continuing. And this is something for 20 years the central banks of the world have brought in tight and has maintained very, very stable currency environments. You could look at the euro, you put a chart at 109. You could say 109 to 115, 116, and the euro's been behaving. If you look at the dollar index, it's been the same thing, a long, protracted stability.
Yep.
This is what's breaking out, and this brings volatility. So, you've got to be, as we used to say, Jack be quick, Jack be nimble. Don't get caught on the candlestick here. You
I
know?
love that. We're going to end on that. That's going to make it definitely into one of our shorts. Again, I want to thank you so much for joining us, Stephen. We'll see you
Thank
Monday
you.
morning, and hopefully we'll have Big Beat back with us to keep this going. Have a fantastic weekend.
Thank you, Howard.